Welcome to PropTech Pulse, the podcast that takes the pulse of prop technology in multifamily. I'm your host, Shelly Robinson, and each week we'll be diving deep into innovations, challenges, and the future of work in property technology and multifamily. From AI-driven property management to blockchain and real estate, we're here to explore how technology is reshaping the way we live, work, and invest in multifamily communities. Whether you're a property manager, a tech entrepreneur, an executive, or even simply curious about the future of living spaces, PropTech Pulse is your weekly dose of insights and inspiration. So let's sync our rhythms and get on with the show. It's time to take the pulse. Welcome to the latest episode of PropTech Pulse. Today I have Jonathan Gheller with UDP with me. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Shelly. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. I'm so glad that you said yes to this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to the chat today. To kind of kick us off, why don't you give our listeners a brief overview of kind of what has got you here today and brought you to this point in your career and your journey?
Yeah, of course. I've been working on software in the internet for maybe 16 years plus or so. So it's a good chunk of my professional career. I spent most of my career on sort of consumer-facing applications. A good chunk of it was around sort of social media, what ended up being things like Facebook and the likes. I had a company that was using sort of social dynamics to help create recommendation algorithms for shopping, and that ended up being acquired at Google. Then Facebook, and if you remember, Hive and other companies were coming about, and that was very exciting as well. And we ended up building a small company that ended up at Facebook as well. And at Facebook, if you use sort of the Blue app, the main app, and you've seen things like on this day, X years ago, or you and you have been friends, for X amount of years, or the year in review, that's sort of the transition from the acquisition to the team to the things that we built. On Facebook. Yeah, so it was great. It was fun, and I still have a sort of a soft spot for consumer-facing applications and really enjoy it. What got me here, to be very candid, I think the turning point is that at some point I decided for I don't know what reason, that I really wanted to get to know my customers. That it was exciting and intellectually stimulating in all sorts of interesting ways to be at a place like Facebook, and the caliber of talent is outstanding, and the product has large impact, and it's used by a lot of people. But at some point, I was just eager to get to know my customers and maybe have less customers, but very sort of like closer relationships with them. And in talking to friends and then friends of friends, I was just like saying just that, like, how can I help? So looking for industries where I could be helpful. And I soon stumbled upon, again, a friend of a friend who explained some problems that they were having in real estate. And in their case, they're vertically integrated, they're owners and operators. But as they explained the problem, it sort of clicked in my head. I was like, I've seen this before. I've seen the pattern in my industry. I've seen the pattern in other industries. I know how we solve them. I know why it's a problem. I have thoughts on how to solve it better. And as I got deeper and deeper and deeper, I was like, I think I can do something of value here. I can have the relationships that I want. And so here we are.
Here we are. So was there a particular pain that your friend had? What was that pain?
Right. So as I was talking to them, the typical comment that I used to make people is, and I think we still do to customers to a large degree, is, we're a group of, I want to think, competent software builders.
Yeah.
How can we help?
Yeah.
We have a set of competent software builders. What should we be building for you? So we didn't have some sort of grandiose idea that we developed over time. And now we do have some sort of grandiose ideas of what we should do here. Really, we came here to be of service and to kind of sort of describe what we can be good at and how we can add value, and just heard people talk. And one thing that we kept hearing in different facets, but like if you hear it, like the most sort of parochial but important sort of manifestation of this is like, it's so hard to report. There was it is so hard to know where the business is at, to report up to LPs, up to owners if you're a fee manager. Internally, figure out what's going on in this sort of distributed team. But we have people in Arkansas, we have people in Florida, we have people in Ohio, and like, what's going on? And it's so hard to report. And when I try to understand why, and they would say, well, what ends up happening is that maybe I'm an owner and have multiple sort of, property managers, each one with their PMS, or I'm integrated and I have a PMS, but I also have these single point solutions. And I also have the external data, market data. And as they were describing this, I was like, oh, this is a fundamental problem of all industries, given the state of software today. And so, especially for software companies, by the way. So I can backtrack and give you the context on like how as an industry we end up here, and as sort of like software users we end up here. But that was the problem. The problem is that the truth of my business is sort of like hidden from me. It is fragmented and it's sort of like hidden from me. And as a result of that, very sort of like a critical recurrent task like reporting becomes really hard, but then monitor becomes really hard, and then analyzing becomes really hard, and then making good decisions becomes really hard. And you're trying to be sort of data driven. You're trying to like kind of increase the win probability of your bets, of the things you underwrite if you're an owner, say, and you can't quite do that well. And so again, we can sort of take the 30,000 view on like why we're here, but that's the problem. That problem is a problem that I understand, that I see before. I understand why it exists, how it needs to be solved. And there's a bunch of specificities to the industry, but that's what clicked with me. I'm like, I can help there.
You can help. That is, and it's you're right. It exists in every industry, and every industry has technology complexity, which I think other companies are trying to solve for right now. And then data decisioning in a way that you have as real time as it can be, decision-making skills with the data you want to see and the data you want to decision on. So that's really powerful. Was there any aha moments you had early on when you started working in this different vertical space of multifamily and commercial real estate?
Yeah, I think there was a couple. The first one was sort of the nature of the fragmentation of the industry, and how there's not just this secular trend of sort of software fragmentation and system of record fragmentation. There's also like a structural fragmentation in the industry. So maybe I can give some historical context on this. A little bit more verbose answer, but maybe more complete, which is, like a super simplified version of the history of software as it relates to data could be something like this. We used to have ERPs, enterprise resource planning software, and you used to be able to run an entire organization on SAP or Oracle or whatever it may be, right? And then what happened is that these things were sort of like pretty flexible, but then pretty useless out of the box. And so an army of consultants came about and go like, okay, well, I'll make it work for transportation. I'll make it work for this, right? And then some people, like maybe Mr. Yardy, looks at this in the early 90s and goes like, well, I have the accounting system. I have sort of the chart of accounts. I can save you all these millions of dollars in customization if I just give you like a vertical ERP that just does property. So that's called a property management system. And then there's a transportation management system, and an inventory, and a warehouse management system, and an electronic medical record. Like everyone was like, okay, let's stop spending money on consultants for like one-off customizations. So let's just have like this thing, right? And then what ended up happening is it didn't last long there, right? You ended up having single point solutions that were extremely well. You ended up having, like external data sources. And so it sort of broke again. And so we're back to the point where you have all these consultants helping you do migration, helping do integrations. And so the first thing I said was like, oh, we're back here, but it's not the sort of PMS, wall garden, everything in one place solution that will, because you can sort of cat is out of the bag. People will use outstanding, tenant experience apps. People will use better, fraud detection apps. People will get CoStar data. People will get Greenster data. So that's sort of out of the bag. And so the idea that you sort of have to go back here to have some sort of unification and simplification feels fairly natural. So that's one insight. And the other insight, as I was saying, is then you look at real estate and you realize, well, the challenge is that, as I was saying before, you not only do you have like fragmentation of tools, you also have fragmentation of like agents, right? And so an investor may have, like a large investor may have requirements for the PMS they want, and then the property manager may have a preferred PMS, and then the owner may have a PMS. So you're in the middle, you're the owner, and you may be looking at 5 PMSs. You're the property manager, and you're looking at 5 PMSs. You're the investor, you may be looking at 10 PMSs, and that's just the PMS, and that's structural, right? As opposed to going to a software company or to like a, I don't know, logistics company and say, here's a new HR software. And you go in and you slot yourself there, and that's it. There's not going to be 50 HR softwares inside Facebook. It's going to be one. Yeah. Because there's one agent to make the decision. But here it's fragmented. So there's the two insights are, there's something almost like, Hegelian, right? Like the necessary time for the change because of the structure of things or the secular trends. And then there's structural issues of real estate where I'm like, this is never going to get fixed. So we're like brute forcing everyone into like one system to do everything because you can't even coordinate because everyone gets to pick whatever they want, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So for you, you're really solving the problem of all these disparate systems so that you can get insights all in one place in a software agnostic environment.
That's right. And so we have sort of different levels of value as we see it, right? And the one is, it is very hard to run your business. It adds an enormous amount of complexity to have all these tools running around. And so the main complexity is on the sort of the exhaust, like on the data, on like what happened and so forth. And so UDP drives an enormous amount of complexity. So the way we think about the value is sort of like all the data in a trustworthy fashion in one place, so you can see it how you want to see it. So you can analyze your business, understand your business however you want. And that's sort of like what we call UDP core. All your data in one place, which means reporting instead of taking forever and being error prone, it happens automatically. Monitoring instead of being slow and sort of like reactive can be proactive. And then for higher tiers of the product, it also means that you get access to sort of, effective machine learning and AI models that can drive change in your business, right?
It's so true. And what do you think has been like your biggest learning as a founder moving into PropTech space? What has kind of been your biggest learning moment in moving into this space with all of these systems?
Well, I think the product has matured a lot and it's adding a lot of value, but I still feel pretty much a beginner in my mind. So I'm still sort of surprised and like, wide eyes looking at how things are and trying to understand them. I think there's one difference that is not PropTech, it's just general. I spend most of my life consumer facing. Consumer facing moves really fast. You make changes, people see them. Enterprise sales of any kind are slow. I'm a deeply impatient person. I have to do a lot of. I'm too impatient to meditate to fix my impatience. That's how impatient I am. Enterprise sales move at the speed that it moves. And I think that's like a change in gears. I think the other thing is, I think real estate, my guess is that there's a bunch of people, this is a conjecture, like I don't know if this is true or not, it's my read is, RealPage has had a lot of people come from like the tech world with like ideas of how things should happen. And I think that's not really, I don't think that's really productive. Because the devil's in the details, and there's a lot of details, especially on a fragmented market like this. Like the operator has an experience, the owner has an experience, the owners of small units, bigger units, certain regions, and so I think it's been interesting for both parts, me and the customers and everyone we talk to, that we're just like, this is the things we know how to do. These are the problems that we're trying to fix. And that, probably having seen that maybe 80% of our roadmap is just like customer driven. We're like, we just want to solve problems. What's painful? And then if we hear a lot of people saying the same thing, again, on with the direction of sort of like what we think as data integration and operational decision making. Like how you get everything in one place and make better decisions, right?
That's really good. And what I'd like to kind of reiterate too is you said two things that I think are really important. One is really listening to your customers. And two, it's a long sales cycle. So the other listeners that are PropTech founders, in your planning, in your business planning, if you're getting ready to launch and go to market, you got to keep that in mind. And that is a theme I hear with my clients all the time.
You got to finance yourself properly. You got to time it adequately. You have to spend adequately. Some things, some things take, it's like having a baby. Some things you have to wait the whole 9 months, right? It's not like two ladies can have it in half the time. Yeah, so some sometimes you have to wait. And so I'm very impatient, and some of the things I think you gain by having patience and having the right conversations at the right pace with the right people, building conviction on both ends that the partnership is the correct one. And I think that's the other piece, like because we're outsiders, increasingly less so, I would say, but because we are coming from the outside, every client is a partnership. Like we have to be very thoughtful about who we partner with so that we can learn and grow, be inspired, have productive conversations and so forth, right?
Oh, totally. So true. Well, let's move into my listeners' favorite portion of future in a bottle questions. What do you think are the top things you see changing in PropTech and multifamily in kind of the next 5 years, trends-wise?
Well, that's so interesting. I mean, certainly I'm betting on one. That's sort of why UDP exists. And I think this is broadly true in many industries. And we have examples in other industries where we see this play out, and it'll happen, and it's happening in multifamily as well, which is there is rightfully sort of like a plethora of single point solutions that are amazing that you don't want to change for the default that is coming out of the PMS walled garden. You want to keep that. It is better. That drives complexity. Complexity drives, slows you down, increases cost, increases opacity in the business and so forth. So somehow we need to get everything in one place. It is impossible to run a business if everything is spread out. I think that's coming. Then what does it mean to run an organization this way? I think real estate and multifamily benefits from like sort of long cycles. You take a long time to make a decision or an acquisition. You own it for a long time. It takes a while to do a disposition. And then if you're successful, you can be at it for 30 years, 20 years. And so there's a sort of intelligence that is embedded in owners and operators in this industry that you can call almost intuitive, or maybe intuitive plus historical, meaning that they know, they've seen it, like pattern matching and intuition that drives outcomes and successful over the very long term. And I think because of the accessibility because we have the data right now, I think we're gonna start seeing a sort of like new intelligence emerge in the industry from like intuitive and historical and pattern matching to like, let's call it analytical.
Yeah.
Or like data intelligence. Data.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so in the last generation, we saw the first sort of like bubbling up of that when people started building or using revenue management to figure out like rents. But then, take that one simple example. Revenue management is very tactical. But rent is a conversation that you have to think about underwriting over 10 years. Like, it's not just like tactical things today. And rent today is also a function of like occupancy and potential vacancy in the future and delinquencies. And, bad debt, like it gets a little bit more complex, right? And so I think organizations are going to start doing that. And as a result of that, I think the other thing that's going to happen in multifamily is that multifamily is going to get more dynamic. So what I mean by that is that, again, from the outside looking in, you can look at real estate and say, if you operate sort of like industrial real estate, you're on like decade-long contracts, and if you operate maybe what would be the fastest, like hospitality, like it moves very fast. And so where is multifamily in all of this? And multifamily is like, again, closer to hospitality than say, industrial. And what's going to happen is that multifamily is going to move closer and closer to how hospitality operates. It's going to get more dynamic and faster, and which means less waste, more revenue, better decisions, faster decisions. And I think that's sort of happening. And we're seeing it through the sort of lens of perspective of UDP.
I like hearing that. I've often thought too, like, we've always used to look manually at your people, your product, your price, and your promotion, kind of all those triggers affecting the property, and how to tie that all together through really informed predictive decisioning over time. So I think you're spot on with your themes. Simplification is a big theme with my clients that I hear. How do we simplify? How do we get to better decisioning faster in a simpler way, seeing the data we want when we want to see it?
And there's ways to measure that, right? I mean, one way that we measure that in organizations on the sort of like, again, we think of it as like reporting, monitoring, analysis, automation, like the end-to-end data stack, like get the data in one place, normalize, apples to apples, report, monitor, automate, AI, like the whole stack, right? But if you look at the initial, the base of the stack, sometimes we try to talk to our customers and say, okay, you have 100 sort of dashboards and reports that you use to run your organization. Let's pick one. How long does it take you to put this together? So it takes you half an hour. Okay, how many properties do you have? Okay, so that's 50 properties. So it takes you 15 minutes, 1,500 minutes. So it takes you 14 hours, 16 hours, 20 hours, one report a week. And so that's sort of like a proxy for complexity. Like all that work to do the work, sort of like meta work, taking over the actual work. Like the actual work is like, what should we do? And then doing it.
Totally.
So we measure that. We measure like hours. We measure things like waste reduced and revenue increased. But also measure like hours saved, because it's a good proxy for simplicity, right? If you spend less hours on something, it's a good proxy that things have gotten simpler.
I know some organizations that have like 4 analysts, and all they do full time is look reports to try to get to insights. So
one of my favorite
of efficiency.
One of my favorite feedback from one of our customers is that they call UDP the UDP golf tournament sponsorship, because they're like, no, they haven't fired us, but we are playing more golf. And I'm like, well, that's good. Yeah.
If they're and they're brilliant minds, if they're able to free up more time to actually
that's the point. That's the thing. Sorry to interrupt, but that's the thing that frustrates me the more. They hire these young, bright minds to put them to wrangle data. And I'm like, they should be thinking, right? And they'll add you more value.
They're in a data hazing phase, working 60 hours a week. Spreadsheet junkies, those poor people. So you're speaking their language and solving their problems.
I hope so. Yeah.
Do you think any PropTech trends right now are overhyped at all? Anything that comes to mind that you think is overplayed in the industry? And
I think there's though we sell a lot of sort of AI driven products. I do think there's a little bit of overhype on AI, mostly around sort of the sequencing, the pathing for this, and what you can expect. If you connect sort of like some ChatGPT wrapper to like the PMS data, it'll tell you stuff. It'll tell you the wrong stuff. And so you sort of have to invest in like centralizing your data and on a system that has what you call like an ontological representation of the industry, meaning that understands that at least as a unit has a tenant, the tenant can pay or not pay, and if it doesn't pay, he's delinquent. Like otherwise it'll just like do random stuff. And so what ends up happening is that either you're just getting random stuff, or you're putting them on workflows, and the customer or the tenant is looking at this and going like, I can tell this is a robot and you don't care, right? And so either the tenant is like, oh, you're shortcutting me here, or you are internally just like trying to run a business on machine hallucinations. And so I think there's a very different way of how you build productive AI on the enterprise, broadly speaking, than you do on the consumer side. And part of it is you have sort of like to have like unified data platforms, like effectively sort of like unified data models, like a representation of data that is consistent, that you can do these things called like retrieval augmentation generation or things where you go to these models and you tell them this is what things mean, this is how they relate to each other. So it doesn't go nuts, right? And then, by the way, that this is important on the back office as you're trying to understand the business. But again, when you try to like automate stuff to customers and tenants, or automate stuff writing back to the PMS, you gotta be super, super careful. So I think when we sell our product to customers, we're like, we are only gonna sell you core. We're not gonna sell you the rest of the stuff, because you first need to be convinced that you trust the data, and I need to be convinced that your data is clean enough. Like we need to make sure that the foundations are correct. Everything else is running machine learning models, statistical models, so we'll just hallucinate.
Just a few more questions before we kind of wrap up today. What's your bold prediction for the multifamily and commercial real estate industry in the next 10 years?
Well, that's so interesting. I would imagine that the multifamily industry, I think real estate at large, but multifamily, which I understand a little bit more, would look less like sort of like industrial projects, like industrial scale and speed projects, and sort of traditional finance projects. And it'll look more like, as I was saying, hospitality, like daily dynamic business with a sort of like a more modern financial layer on top of it. And so what that means, I think, is that, just to be, I guess, concrete, is so today it takes, a long time to acquire, a bunch of energy operating, decisions take weeks or months, same for these positions. And imagine if this was more sort of like modern finance at the speed of hospitality, which means you're making decisions on an intraday basis on what's happening on the operations, but also making decisions on an intraday basis on the finances. And so, right now, for example, something as simple as a bridge loan, it's an ordeal to decide or not decide, to match with the right brokers, to talk to the right lenders, to pick. It's like, whereas if you want to get an extension on the credit line for your credit card, it's like a button. Why? Because there's an exchange of information between me and the lender that allows that to happen. And so from the regions to headquarters, from managers to owners, from owners to operators, internally and externally, there'll be more fluidity in the information and the decisions, and the feedback will be much faster. And as a result of that, once investors are in the loop as well, the financing experience, the acquisition, the disposition, the bridge loans, the covenants that you have to report on, like everything will be able to move much faster. So it'll feel sort of like, hotels meet Wall Street, as opposed to more like a factory meets, like a banker, on the commodity exchange in Chicago, whatever that might be. It's just going to be faster, I think, much faster.
It's such a note right now that there are tremendous opportunities for automation and kind of industry lifecycle integration, and the technology exists now. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for future companies to evolve and solve these problems.
One simple model is, complex is slow.
Yes.
Simple is fast.
Simple is fast.
And so we're complex now. We're moving to simple. The next step of simplicity will be speed.
I think that's great insights. Any advice you would give to other multifamily professionals who are looking to stay ahead of the PropTech curve right now?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think as I'm talking more, I think you should try and work backwards from objectives. Meaning, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And I think objectives needs to be like first principles. Meaning, cheaper is not really a good objective because there's many ways around that, right? Simpler, however, is a great objective. Because there's 1,000 ways to make something complex and very few ways to make something simple. Just, this is true, you're an artist, this is true in art as well. There's many ways to take a song and make it horribly long and convoluted, and maybe 2 ways to make it good. It's just how it is. Same for business as well. And so I think pick the right first principle goals. Make sure you're at the right level of like first principle reasoning, and then work backwards from there. I think particularly in a world with a bunch of single point solutions, a lot of stuff looks like, putting band-aids or like picking quarters in front of a steamroller, if you mean. And I think you have to be more principled about it. I think that helps a lot.
That's really good advice. And I think Steve Jobs is the one who said simple is hard. I think that, and
simple is very hard.
Very successful at the first creation of simple and the smartphone. So
simple is very hard. Simple is very important, though. Yeah,
it is. Well, this has been a really great conversation, Jonathan. And where can our guests find you? Do you have anything upcoming? Any travels? Any conferences?
Yeah. I'll be at RecCon. I think that's 10 to 13, if I'm not mistaken. That's in Vegas. There'll be a panel on sort of data and decision making that I'll be moderating. Find me there. It'll be awesome to continue conversation with some of your listeners there.
Awesome. And then where can people find your company and you? What's the best location?
So the website for UDP is UDPapp or UDPapp.com. I'm Jonathan Gheller on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'm Jay Gheller on Twitter, though that's more sort of like philosophical rants.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much for the conversation and your time today. It was
Shelly, thanks for inviting me. It's so awesome that we connected, and I'm so grateful you had me here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
And that wraps up another episode of PropTech Pulse. I hope this conversation has given you valuable insights and perhaps even sparked some ideas for your own PropTech journey. Remember, the future of multifamily is being written right now with every technological advance and innovative solution. So stay curious, stay connected, and keep your finger on the pulse of PropTech. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to PropTech Pulse on your favorite podcast platform and share this along with your colleagues. You can also find us on social media for bite-sized insights and updates. I'm Shelley Robinson, and until next time, let's keep innovating, disrupting, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in PropTech and multifamily. Let's build it together.